For years, 9-year-old Caleb Dawson believed his mother had abandoned him and his little sister Lily. Left alone in a freezing apartment, with no food and no way to survive, Caleb did the only thing he could. He carried his sister through the night to seek help. But what he didn't know was that his mother never left by choice. When a hidden camera is discovered in their apartment, the truth begins to unravel. Someone has been watching them. Someone dangerous. And when Caleb learns that his mother was taken, not gone, the real nightmare begins. A mysterious man lurks in the shadows. A forgotten past resurfaces. And as Caleb fights to bring his mother home, he realizes that the people he trusts most may be hiding secrets of their own. A dangerous game is about to begin. And the cost of losing? Everything. Will Caleb uncover the truth before it's too late? Or will he become the next to disappear? Don't miss this gripping, high-stakes story. Like and subscribe for more thrilling content. Drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. The kitchen cabinets were empty. Caleb Dawson knew that before he even opened them, but still he checked. Again, as if food might magically appear. Behind him, Lily shifted on her feet, hugging her stuffed bunny. "Caleb, I'm hungry." "I know." He spoke softly, swallowing the knot in his throat. "I'm looking." There was nothing. The fridge hummed, its weak light flickering over a bottle of ketchup, expired milk, and a single bruised apple. The last apple. "You eat it," he said, handing it to Lily. "But what about you?" "I had some crackers from Mrs. Peterson earlier." It was a lie, but necessary. The apartment was freezing. The heat had been off for 2 days, and tonight the cold bit harder. Caleb pulled the last good blanket over Lily's shoulders as she curled up on their shared mattress on the floor. The thin walls did little to block the sounds of sirens in the distance. 3 days. Their mother had been gone for 3 days. It wasn't the first time, but it was the longest. Caleb had found the eviction notice, crumpled under the couch. Final warning. He didn't know what final meant, but it didn't sound good. As Lily shivered beside him, Caleb decided they couldn't stay here. Moving carefully, he wrapped Lily in the thick blue fleece blanket, the one their neighbor, Dr. Carter, had given them last Christmas. He lifted her into his arms, heart pounding. They needed help. The hallway was dark, the overhead light flickering. Their mother's door 4 units down felt like a world away. His breath fogged in the cold air as he knocked first softly, then harder. A shuffle inside. Then the lock clicked. Dr. Carter stood there in slippers, her dark hair pulled back, concern creasing her features. Her eyes flickered from Caleb to Lily in his arms, then to his tear-streaked face. "They turned off the heat," Caleb said, his voice breaking. "And Lily hasn't eaten properly in days." Something in Dr. Carter's expression shifted, gentle but firm. She stepped aside, allowing the warmth of her apartment to spill into the cold hallway. "Come in, sweetheart," she said softly. "You're safe now." But Caleb had no idea that safety was only an illusion. Because someone was watching, and they weren't going to let the Dawson kids go that easily. Warmth. The moment Caleb stepped inside Dr. Carter's apartment, the heat wrapped around him like a forgotten memory. The smell of ginger cookies lingered in the air, mixing with the faint scent of old books and lavender tea. He hesitated just inside the doorway, still holding Lily tightly. It felt wrong to be here to need help. He was supposed to be the one protecting her. "Come sit," Dr. Carter urged, her voice gentle but firm. "I'll get you both something warm to eat." Caleb nodded slowly, finally setting Lily down on the plush brown couch. She blinked sleepily, murmuring, "Your house smells nice, Dr. Carter." Dr. Carter smiled, tucking the blue fleece blanket around her. "Thank you, sweetheart." But her eyes, those sharp, knowing eyes, were locked on Caleb. She saw the tension in his shoulders, the way he stayed on his feet, hovering near the door like he expected someone to come tearing it open. "When was the last time you ate?" she asked, moving toward the kitchen. "Yesterday, maybe," Caleb admitted. "But Lily had an apple tonight." Dr. Carter said nothing, just quietly began making sandwiches. Caleb finally sat on the floor beside the couch, one hand resting protectively on Lily's shoulder. Everything should have felt safe. But something was off. A prickle ran down Caleb's spine. The feeling of being watched. His eyes darted around the apartment. The walls were lined with bookshelves, a fireplace crackled in the corner, and a soft lamp cast a golden glow. Everything was normal, except something wasn't. Then he saw it. A small blinking red light in the corner of the room. His breath hitched. He turned sharply to Dr. Carter, who was now watching him closely. "What's wrong?" she asked. Caleb didn't answer. Slowly, he rose to his feet and stepped toward the bookshelf where the red light had flickered. There, tucked between two books, was a tiny black camera. His stomach twisted. Someone had been watching them. Dr. Carter followed his gaze, then froze. For a split second, something flashed across her face recognition. She knew. She moved quickly, reaching up and yanking the camera from the shelf. The red light went dark. Caleb took a step back, his heart hammering. "Who put that there?" Dr. Carter hesitated, gripping the tiny device tightly. Then, with a deep breath, she met his eyes. "I was going to tell you," she said carefully, "but I needed to be sure." "Sure of what?" She hesitated. "That someone has been watching your apartment, too?" The room spun. Caleb clenched his fists. "What do you mean?" Dr. Carter crouched down, so she was eye level with him. "I've been noticing things, Caleb. People standing near your door late at night. A car parked outside that never seems to leave. And now this." She held up the camera. A lump formed in Caleb's throat. He had always thought the bad things only happened inside their apartment when his mother left, when they ran out of food. But what if the real danger had been waiting just outside their door all along? Dr. Carter placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Listen to me. I called someone who can help. A police officer who specializes in cases like this." A sharp knock on the door made them both jumps. Dr. Carter stood slowly, exchanging a glance with Caleb before moving toward the door. She unlatched it, revealing a tall woman in a navy blue uniform. Officer June Kovacs. Her eyes flickered over Caleb and Lily, then landed on the camera in Dr. Carter's hand. Her jaw tightened. "This just got a lot worse," she murmured. Somebody wasn't just watching Caleb and Lily. They were waiting for something. Officer June Kovacs stepped inside, shutting the door behind her. The warmth of the apartment did nothing to soften the cold tension settling in the room. She took the small black camera from Dr. Carter's hand, turning it over, her sharp eyes narrowing. "This isn't some cheap surveillance gadget," she muttered. "It's professional grade." Caleb's stomach twisted. Professional? Someone had been watching them with actual spy equipment? Dr. Carter crossed her arms. "This was hidden in my apartment. But you said you've noticed people hanging around Caleb's door?" Officer Kovacs nodded. "For the past few weeks, one of my patrol officers has reported a black sedan parked near the Dawson apartment building. Always with the same man inside. No plates. Tinted windows." She exhaled. "We ran it through the system, nothing came up. Almost like he doesn't exist." Caleb barely heard the rest. The world was tilting beneath him. Someone had been watching their apartment for weeks? What did he look like? His voice came out hoarse. Kovacs hesitated. White male. Late 30s. Tall, wiry build. Always wearing a baseball cap pulled low. A sharp image flashed through Caleb's mind. A man in a black cap, standing at the end of the hall outside their apartment. It had been just a glimpse, one of the nights he'd been waiting for his mother to come home. He had thought it was just some neighbor passing through. But now was it him? Caleb's hands curled into fists. "I've seen him." Dr. Carter turned to him, alarm flashing across her face. "When?" "A few nights ago. I thought he was just some guy." His voice shook. "You think he was watching us?" Officer Kovacs crouched down in front of him. "I don't think, Caleb." Her voice was low, serious. "I know." A thick silence settled. Lily stirred on the couch, rubbing her eyes. Caleb, she mumbled sleepily. What's wrong? He forced a smile, his heart still hammering. Nothing, Lil. Go back to sleep. She blinked once, then rolled over, hugging her stuffed bunny. Dr. Carter ran a hand through her hair, clearly unsettled. What do we do? Officer Kovacs stood, slipping the hidden camera into a small evidence bag. First, I need to see their apartment. If someone planted a camera here, there's a good chance there's one in their home, too. The words sent a chill down Caleb's spine. There could be a hidden camera inside their apartment right now. Watching. Recording. Let's go, Kovacs said. But stay behind me. And if I say run, you run. Got it. Caleb swallowed hard and nodded. The walk to their apartment felt longer than ever. The hallway was dim, the buzzing fluorescent lights flickering overhead. Shadows stretched along the floor, twisting against the walls. When they reached the door, Officer Kovacs didn't open it right away. She studied the lock. Then her shoulders stiffened. Caleb saw it a second later. The door was already open. Not much. Just enough for a sliver of darkness to peek through. But it had definitely been closed when he left. Someone had been inside. Or worse, someone was still in there. Kovacs moved swiftly, pulling out her gun. She turned slightly, murmuring low, "Stay behind me." Caleb barely breathed as she nudged the door open. The apartment was dark, silent. Kovacs stepped inside first, her footsteps careful, controlled. Caleb and Dr. Carter followed, the air thick with tension. And then a scrape of movement, the closet door half open. Caleb's pulse skyrocketed. Someone was hiding inside. Kovacs reacted instantly. She moved forward, gun aimed. Come out now. Hands where I can see them. For a beat, there was silence. Then the closet door swung open. A man stepped out. Tall, thin, black baseball cap pulled low. The same man Caleb had seen before. His lips curled into a slow, knowing smile. Wow, he murmured, lifting his hands lazily. Took you long enough. Caleb's blood ran cold. Who was this man? And how long had he been waiting for them? The apartment was silent. Too silent. Caleb's heart pounded as he stood frozen near the doorway. Officer Kovacs' gun was locked onto the stranger's chest, her stance unshaken. Dr. Carter stood slightly behind them, her breath sharp and controlled. The man in the black baseball cap just smirked, his hands lazily raised. Well, he said casually, aren't you going to ask who I am? Drop to your knees, Kovacs ordered, her voice cold and steady. Now. The man sighed, then slowly knelt. Relax, officer. I'm not here to hurt anyone. Kovacs reached for her radio. Unit 14, I need immediate backup at Dawson's apartment. Possible break-in, suspects detained. The man laughed. Break-in. He tilted his head. That's funny, because I didn't break in. Caleb clenched his fists. You were inside our house. You had a camera in Dr. Carter's apartment. Who are you? The man's smirk didn't waver. His sharp green eyes flicked toward Caleb, assessing him. Then he said something that made the world tilt. I'm looking for your mother. Silence. Caleb's throat tightened. Liar. The man shrugged. You sure about that? Kovacs grabbed his arm, pulling it behind his back. Enough. You're under arrest for trespassing and illegal surveillance. As she secured the cuffs, the man barely resisted. Instead, he turned his head slightly toward Caleb and spoke just loud enough for him to hear. Your mom didn't leave you, kid. Someone took her. A chill shot down Caleb's spine. Shut up, Kovacs snapped, yanking him to his feet. The man's voice remained eerily calm. You think she ran off because she wanted to? Knock it. She was taken. And if you don't start asking the right questions, you'll never find her. Kovacs shoved him toward the door. But Caleb, his heart slamming against his ribs, couldn't move. Could it be true? For years, he had believed the same story. Mom left. Mom chose drugs over them. Mom abandoned them. But what if she hadn't? What if she had been taken? Dr. Carter knelt beside him, her face gentle but serious. Caleb, look at me. He did, but his hands were shaking. She squeezed his shoulder. We don't know if anything he said is true, but I promise you we'll find out. Caleb's chest was tight. What if we've been wrong this whole time? Dr. Carter's eyes darkened. Then it means your mother might be in danger. Kovacs shoved the man toward the hallway, speaking into her radio. Suspect in custody. Searching the apartment now. Then, before she stepped out, she gave Caleb a look, one that sent ice through his veins. Stay here. And lock the door behind me. That meant only one thing. She wasn't sure they were safe. The apartment felt suffocating after Kovacs left. Caleb sat on the couch, his fingers digging into his knees, his mind spinning. If his mom was taken, why? By who? And worse, why would this man care? Dr. Carter sat beside him. You don't have to believe him. He could be manipulating you. But Caleb's gut told him otherwise. What if he's telling the truth? A sharp knock on the door made them both flinches. Caleb jumped up before realizing the sound wasn't coming from the front door. It was coming from inside the apartment, from his mother's bedroom. Dr. Carter went pale. Caleb don't. But he was already moving. His hand trembled as he reached for the closet handle. One breath. Two. He yanked it open and a cell phone tumbled out. Not just any cell phone. His mother's. The screen was cracked, the battery long dead. But something was stuffed inside the case. A folded piece of paper. Caleb pulled it out, his heart hammering. His mother's handwriting. Only 3 words. Don't trust him. Caleb's fingers clenched around the fragile, yellowed paper. Don't trust him. His mother's handwriting. Sharp, urgent, desperate. Dr. Carter leaned in, her eyes scanning the note. This was hidden inside the phone case? Caleb nodded, his pulse pounding in his ears. She must have left it before she disappeared. Dr. Carter's face was unreadable. Or before she was taken. A chill ran through him. The phone was dead, but what if there was something inside? A text? A voicemail? He scrambled toward the coffee table, grabbing Lily's school tablet. If he could charge a bang, bang, bang. A fist slammed against the front door. Dr. Carter jerked up, pulling Caleb back instinctively. Caleb. Open up, Officer Kovacs. Dr. Carter hurried to the door, unlocking it. Kovacs strode in, her expression sharp, urgent. We need to move, she said, voice clipped. Now. Caleb's stomach dropped. What happened? Kovacs shut the door behind her, her hand resting on her holster. The man in the baseball cap? She exhaled sharply. He's gone. Caleb's blood turned to ice. What do you mean gone? I mean someone intercepted our patrol car, took out the officers and broke him loose. Kovacs' jaw tightened. Whoever he works for? They didn't want him talking. Dr. Carter stiffened. This isn't just some stalker, is it? Kovacs shook her head. No. This is organized. Coordinated. And it's about their mother. Caleb's hands curled into fists. Everything was spiraling too fast. His mother's disappearance. The cameras. The warning notes. And now the man in the baseball cap, gone. Tell me the truth, he said, voice sharp, shaking. You don't think she ran away, do you? Kovacs hesitated. No, Caleb. I don't. A sharp breath. His lungs felt tight. Dr. Carter put a hand on his shoulder. We'll figure this out. But before anyone could say another word, the power went out. The apartment plunged into darkness. Lily let out a small gasp from the couch. Caleb immediately moved toward her, pulling her close. Dr. Carter's breath was slow, controlled. That wasn't normal. Officer Kovacs drew her gun. Everyone stays put. The dim glow of the streetlights outside barely illuminated the room. Shadows stretched long and thin across the walls. Then a noise. Faint. Outside the window. A car idling. Caleb's heart pounded as he moved toward the curtains. just enough to peek through a black sedan. Parked right outside. No headlights. No movement. Just sitting there, watching. His stomach twisted. "It's him," he whispered. Kovacs moved swiftly, positioning herself near the door. "We're leaving. Now." Dr. Carter grabbed Lily, wrapping the fleece blanket around her. Caleb followed, his hands slick with sweat. They barely made it to the hallway before crash. The window in the apartment shattered. A metal canister hit the floor, hissing as smoke began spilling out. They were being forced out. Kovacs didn't hesitate. "Run! Run!" Caleb barely had time to register before they were sprinting. Down the hall, down the stairs, out the back exit. The cold night air hit him like a slap as they burst into the alleyway. Kovacs had her gun drawn, scanning the area. The black sedan's engine roared to life. Caleb's breath hitched. They were about to be hunted. Kovacs turned sharply, grabbing her radio. "I need backup." At the radio cut to static. She cursed under her breath. "They're jamming our signal." Dr. Carter pulled Caleb and Lily close. "Where do we go?" Kovacs' eyes darted across the darkened street. Then, she locked onto something. A small motel sign glowing in the distance. "The Starlight Motel." "We hide," Kovacs said. "We disappear." Caleb swallowed hard. They weren't just running from a man in a baseball cap anymore. They were running from something bigger, something that didn't want them to find his mother, and that meant she might still be alive. The neon Starlight Motel sign flickered erratically as Officer Kovacs led them toward the entrance. The parking lot was nearly empty, except for a few rusted cars and an old motorcycle leaning against the far wall. Caleb's legs burned from running, but his mind raced faster. His mother hadn't run away. She had been taken, and now someone was willing to hunt them down to keep the truth buried. Lily whimpered against Dr. Carter's shoulder. "Are they going to find us?" Dr. Carter squeezed her tightly. "Not if we're smart." Kovacs moved quickly to the motel office, rapping her knuckles against the scratched-up front desk. An older man in a stained white tank top shuffled out from the back, eyeing them suspiciously. "No cops," he grunted, seeing Kovacs' uniform. "We just need a room," she said, lowering her voice. "Cash." The man's gaze lingered on Caleb and Lily, then flicked back to Kovacs. "You're running from someone, huh?" Kovacs slid a few crumpled bills across the counter. "We were never here." The man hesitated, then grabbed a key off the hook. "Room 12. Keep your heads down." Kovacs snatched the key and motioned for them to move. They hurried down the dimly lit corridor until they reached the door. She pushed it open, scanned the room for threats, then ushered them inside. It smelled of cigarette smoke and cheap cleaning supplies. The carpet was stained, the wallpaper peeling, but at least it had curtains that could block the windows. "We'll stay here for a few hours," Kovacs said, bolting the door. "Then we move again." Caleb sat on the edge of the bed, his mind spinning. The man in the baseball cap had escaped. Their apartment had been attacked. And now, they were hiding in a motel like fugitives. His mother's note burned in his pocket. "Don't trust him." But who? The man in the baseball cap? Someone else? Then a realization struck him like a brick. He stood up suddenly. The man in the baseball cap. He wasn't working alone. Kovacs turned to him. "What makes you say that?" Caleb's pulse hammered. If he was just some random creep watching us, no one would have broken him out of police custody. He was important. He knew something. Kovacs didn't deny it. "That's why we need to find out who he's working for." Caleb's breath came fast. "I think I know where to start." Kovacs frowned. "Where?" Caleb hesitated. He wasn't sure he could say it aloud without it sounding insane. But then he did. "The motel owner." Dr. Carter's head snapped up. "What?" Caleb's mind raced back to the front desk. The way the man looked at them. The way he knew they were running. The way he wasn't surprised. "He recognized us," Caleb said, his voice sure now. "When he saw us, he wasn't confused. He knew we were running. Kovac's face darkened. You think he knows something? I think he knows exactly what happened to my mom. A heavy silence. Then a soft tap on the motel room door. 3 knocks. Then a pause. Then 2 more. A pattern. Lily tensed. Dr. Carter's fingers curled into Caleb's shoulder. Kovacs reached for her gun. Then a voice. Low. Familiar. If you want answers, meet me at the ice machine. Caleb's breath caught. It was the motel owner. The ice machine stood at the far end of the hallway, humming softly. Caleb's heart pounded as he and Kovacs approached. The motel owner stood there, arms crossed, cigarette dangling from his lips. You figured it out quick, kid, the man muttered. Didn't expect that. Caleb's fists clenched. You know where my mom is? The man exhaled smoke, his tired eyes studying him. Then he said something that made everything crack apart. I don't know where she is now. His voice was rough. But I know where she was taken. Caleb froze. The motel owner glanced over his shoulder, as if making sure no one was listening. Then he spoke again. The man in the baseball cap? He works for someone powerful. Kovacs stepped forward. Who? The motel owner hesitated. Then Nash Carter. Dr. Carter's last name. Caleb's blood ran cold. He turned to her, saw her face go pale. Nash Carter, the motel owner repeated. Your mother's old boyfriend. And your doctor's brother. Caleb's world tilted. He looked at Dr. Carter, his throat closing. Dr. Carter, who had taken them in, who had protected them, who had acted like she didn't know anything. But she did. She had known all along. Silence stretched thick in the cold motel hallway. Caleb's chest rose and fell in sharp, uneven breaths as he stared at Dr. Carter, the woman who had saved him and Lily. The woman he had trusted. But now, her name felt like poison on his tongue. Carter. Just like Nash Carter, the man who had taken his mother. Dr. Carter's face was pale, her lips slightly parted, but she didn't deny it. She didn't even try. Kovac's voice was razor-sharp. Evelyn. Dr. Carter exhaled shakily. Let me explain. Caleb's stomach twisted. How long? His voice was barely a whisper. How long have you known? Dr. Carter's hands trembled at her sides. Caleb, listen to me, how long? Lily whimpered behind him, but Caleb didn't turn. His whole body shook, rage and betrayal clawing at his throat. Dr. Carter swallowed hard. Since the beginning. The words hit like a gunshot. Caleb stumbled back, his breath ragged. Officer Kovacs' expression darkened. You knew Nash was involved? Dr. Carter nodded once, but she looked pained. I didn't know the full truth. I just suspected. The motel owner scoffed. Suspected? Lady, your brother has been running some real dark business. You don't just suspect. That. Caleb felt like the ground had been ripped out from under him. Dr. Carter, the woman who had warmed his frozen hands, tucked Lily into bed, fed them when they had nothing, had known all along. You were trying to protect him, Caleb whispered. Dr. Carter's eyes flashed with emotion. No, I was trying to protect you. Caleb didn't believe her. Not anymore. Kovacs stepped between them, jaw clenched. Tell us everything now. Dr. Carter took a breath, eyes flickering to the motel owner, then back to Caleb. Nash wasn't always like this, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. He used to be normal, kind even, but something changed after our parents died. Kovacs frowned. Change how? Dr. Carter closed her eyes for half a second, as if steeling herself. He got involved with dangerous people. And then with your mother, Caleb. Caleb flinched. Hearing his mother's name in her mouth made his skin crawl. They were together for almost 2 years, Dr. Carter continued. But I knew something was wrong. Nash had money he shouldn't have had. He'd disappear for weeks at a time. And your mom, she hesitated. She started using again. Caleb's fists clenched. He knew about his mother's addiction, but hearing it spoken aloud by her felt like a betrayal all over again. So, What? He snapped. She got clean. She left him. Dr. Carter's eyes were haunted. No, Caleb. She tried to leave him. A thick silence. Then the motel owner muttered, and that's when he took her. Caleb's heart slammed against his ribs. No, he whispered. But deep down, he had already known. His mother hadn't run away. She had tried to escape. And Nash had taken her back. Lily whimpered softly. Mommy still with the bad man? The air felt too thick to breathe. Dr. Carter's voice was barely a whisper. I think so. Kovac's jaw was tight with fury. Where is he keeping her? The motel owner shifted uncomfortably. I don't know for sure. But if Nash is still in the same game he was before, there's only one place he'd go. Caleb's pulse roared in his ears. The motel owner met his eyes. The farmhouse. The farmhouse. The words clawed into Caleb's brain. He didn't know much about Nash Carter, but he knew one thing: if Nash had taken their mother somewhere isolated, it wouldn't be for long. He had to act now. Kovacs turned to Dr. Carter. You should have told us the moment you suspected Nash. Dr. Carter shook her head. I didn't have proof. And if Nash found out I was helping you, she swallowed hard, he would have come after all of us. Caleb didn't care. He didn't care about her excuses. Didn't care that she thought she was protecting them. All that mattered was one thing. His mother was alive, and she was waiting for him. Caleb turned sharply to Kovacs. We have to go. Kovacs hesitated. Caleb, I don't care how dangerous it is, he snapped. I don't care about anything except finding her. Dr. Carter's eyes shone with emotion. I know you hate me right now, but listen to me. Nash is unpredictable. If we go in unprepared, we could lose her. We could lose you. Caleb's hands trembled. His entire life had been stolen from him by Nash Carter. His childhood. His family. He wasn't about to let Nash steal his mother too. Then let's prepare, he said, voice cold. Because I'm not leaving her there. Kovacs exhaled sharply, but she didn't argue. Instead, she turned to the motel owner. Where is the farmhouse? The man hesitated. Old highway, 20 miles west. Middle of nowhere. If Nash is there, he's got people with him. Kovacs nodded grimly. We'll need backup. She pulled out her phone, stepping to the side as she made a call. Caleb's hands curled into fists. Lily tugged on his sleeve. Are we really going to get Mommy back? Caleb forced a breath. He looked at his little sister, the person he had fought so hard to protect. Then he turned back to Dr. Carter, his voice cold. We're going to get her back. His eyes darkened. And if Nash tries to stop us, his jaw tightened. I'll make him regret it. The night stretched dark and endless as the old highway disappeared beneath the rumble of Kovac's police cruiser. Caleb sat in the back, his fists clenched so tightly his nails dug into his palms. The farmhouse, 20 miles west. His mother was there. She had to be. Lily was asleep beside him, curled under the fleece blanket. Dr. Carter sat stiffly in the passenger seat, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. No one had spoken since they left the motel. Until now. This could be a trap, Kovacs warned, her hands gripping the wheel. Nash is expecting someone to come for her. He won't be alone. I don't care, Caleb muttered. Kovacs sighed. That's not how this works, kid. We go in smart or we don't go in at all. Dr. Carter finally spoke. How much backup do we have? 2 units are meeting us at the highway turnoff, Kovacs said. That's as much as we can get without alerting Nash we're coming. Caleb's stomach coiled with dread. It wasn't enough. Nash had escaped police custody once. He had people. And he wouldn't let his mother go without a fight. Dr. Carter turned slightly, looking at Caleb. You're staying in the car. No, her lips pressed together. This isn't up for debate. I'm not leaving her again. Dr. Carter exhaled sharply. Kovacs shot her a glance, but neither of them argued further, because they all knew the truth. Caleb wasn't staying behind. 15 minutes later, they reached the farmhouse. It loomed ahead, a rotting 2-story skeleton, barely standing against the wind. The windows were dark. No signs of movement. But Caleb knew better. They were inside. Kovacs pulled the car onto the dirt road and killed the headlights. The other police units were already waiting, their own cars hidden among the trees. A young officer approached Kovacs' window. Perimeter secured. No movement yet. Kovacs nodded. Keep it that way. She turned back to Caleb. You stay next to me. No running off, no heroics. You understand. Caleb swallowed hard. Yeah. His hands shook. Not with fear. With rage. For years, he had hated his mother for leaving. Now, he hated himself for believing it. Because she never left. She was stolen. And tonight, he was taking her back. The officers moved swiftly, spreading out toward the house. Kovacs led Caleb, Dr. Carter close behind. Their footsteps crunched against dead grass as they reached the front porch. Kovacs raised a fist. The signal. One of the officers crept toward the window, peering inside. He hesitated, then turned back, holding up 3 fingers. 3 people inside. Caleb's pulse hammered. On my count, Kovacs whispered. 1, 2, 3, go. The door burst open. Shouts filled the air. Police. Hands up. Everything happened at once. A man lunged from the shadows, swinging a metal pipe crack. An officer staggered back. A second man grabbed for a gun, but Kovacs fired first. The bullet hit his shoulder. He screamed, dropping the weapon. And then a voice. Low. Well. Caleb's blood ran cold. A figure stepped into the dim light. Tall, lean, a familiar smirk curling his lips. Nash Carter. His dark eyes flickered to Caleb, filled with something almost amused. You finally made it, kid. Caleb's breath came in short bursts. His mother. Where was she? His hands curled into fists. Where is she? Nash clicked his tongue. So impatient. Kovacs' gun was locked on him. Where is Maya Dawson? Nash tilted his head. You mean the woman who tried to run from me? His smirk deepened. Don't worry. She's right where I left her. Something inside Caleb snapped. He ran. Straight past Nash. Straight down the darkened hallway. Caleb, Kovacs shouted. But he didn't stop. His heart pounded as he shoved open a door and froze. A chair. Ropes. A woman, her head lulled forward. Dark hair tangled around her face. Her wrists were bruised, bound to the chair. His mother. His voice caught in his throat. Mom? She stirred. Slowly, painfully. Then her head lifted, and her eyes met his. Caleb forgot how to breathe, because, for the first time in years, his mother was looking at him, and she was alive. Caleb rushed forward, his breath tight in his chest. His mother alive. M.O.M. His voice cracked as he reached her, fumbling with the ropes binding her wrists. Maya Dawson's head lifted weakly. Her face was pale, exhausted, her lips dry. But when her dazed eyes focused on him, something inside Caleb broke open. Caleb, her voice was barely a whisper, but it was real. A lump rose in his throat. I'm here. I'm getting you out. A slow clap echoed behind him. Caleb's blood froze. He turned just in time. Nash Carter leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, an unreadable expression on his face. The dim light cast shadows over his sharp features, making him look almost entertained. Well, ain't this something? He drawled. Mother and son, together again. Caleb's hands clenched into fists. You did this to her. His voice was low, steady. Nash tilted his head. I did what I had to do. Footsteps pounded down the hallway. Kovacs. She burst into the room, voice firm. Don't move, Carter. Nash didn't even blink. He just sighed, shaking his head. Then he reached into his jacket. Caleb's breath caught. No crack. A loud noise split the air overhead. Light shattered, plunging the room into darkness. Caleb barely had time to react before a strong arm pulled him backward. Nash. A sharp jolt pressed into Caleb's ribs as Nash's grip tightened around him. He was being taken. Caleb. Kovac's voice was distant, muffled by the chaos. His mother's voice shook. No, let him go. Caleb struggled, kicked, fought, but it was too late. Nash hauled him into the hallway, shoving through a side door. Cold air hit Caleb's face like ice. They were outside now, the porch creaking beneath them. Nash moved fast, dragging him toward a waiting car. Caleb's heart pounded. No, 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 stop fighting, kid. Nash's grip tightened. You want your mom to be okay? Then, you're coming with me. Caleb froze. Nash's voice lowered, calm, but firm. You think I planned this without a backup plan? He jerked his head toward the house. She's not safe unless you come with me. Caleb's breath caught. No. He was bluffing. Right? A sick feeling twisted in his stomach. But what if he wasn't? Nash leaned close, voice taunting. You want to protect her, kid? Then get in the car. Caleb's mind raced. If he stayed, his mother might not be safe. If he left, he might never see her again. His legs felt like stone. He turned his head just in time to see Kovacs and Dr. Carter bursting through the doorway. But they were too far away, and Nash was already pushing him into the back seat. The door slammed shut. The tire screeched. And just like that, Caleb was gone. The night blurred past the car windows, headlights cutting through the endless stretch of road. Caleb sat in the back seat, his pulse pounding in his ears. His hands were bound, but that wasn't what scared him. What scared him was Nash's silence. For the first time, the man wasn't smirking. He was focused, thinking. That was worse. Caleb shifted, testing the knots. Where are you taking me? Nash didn't answer right away. His fingers tapped the steering wheel in a slow rhythm. Then, finally, somewhere quiet, Caleb's stomach twisted. You don't have to do this. Nash let out a low chuckle. That's where you're wrong, kid. Caleb's mind raced. He had to stall, had to think. Then he saw it, Nash's phone, sitting in the center console. If he could get to it. But before he could move, Nash sighed. You know, I liked you better when you didn't talk so much. The car lurched suddenly to the right, skidding onto a dirt road. Caleb's body jerked sideways against the door. Then ahead, a clearing. An old barn stood in the distance, its doors slightly open. Caleb's heart slammed against his ribs. This was it. Whatever Nash had planned, it would happen here. The car rolled to a stop. For a moment, everything was silent. Then Nash turned, his expression unreadable. Get out. Caleb's fingers shook as he reached for the door handle. The second his foot hit the ground, he ran. Or tried to. Nash was faster. A strong arm yanked him backward. Caleb twisted, kicking out, but Nash barely flinched. Stupid, Nash muttered, dragging him toward the barn. Caleb fought harder. You're gonna get caught. His breath came fast. Officer Kovacs, she'll find me. Nash laughed under his breath. You really think I didn't plan for that? Caleb's blood turned cold. Then Nash said something that made everything worse. Kid, I've been one step ahead of you since the beginning. The barn doors swung open. Inside, a figure, bound to a chair. A second hostage. Dr. Evelyn Carter. Her head lifted, her face pale. Caleb? Caleb's stomach dropped. Nash pushed him forward. You two have a lot to talk about. Meanwhile, back at the farmhouse, Officer Kovacs stormed through the wreckage. Radio pressed to her ear. He's got the kid. I repeat, Nash has taken Caleb. Suspect heading north, likely using backroads. Maya Dawson struggled to stand, her hands still trembling. You have to find him. Kovacs' jaw tightened. We will. Then a voice crackled through her earpiece. We've got something, the dispatcher said. One of our highway patrols picked up an abandoned vehicle matching Nash Carter's description, dirt road, 5 miles west. Kovacs snapped to attention. Send me the coordinates. We're moving. Maya grabbed her arm. I'm coming. Kovacs hesitated, then nodded. They were going to get Caleb back. And this time, Nash wasn't getting away. Back at the barn, Caleb stared at Dr. Carter, his heart hammering. How did he get you? Dr. Carter exhaled shakily. I went looking for him. I thought I could stop this. Her eyes darkened. I was wrong. Caleb's hands curled into fists. You knew what he was capable of. Dr. Carter's expression tightened. And I was trying to fix it. Nash leaned lazily against the wall, watching them. Touching little reunion. But let's talk about what happens next. Caleb's breath hitched. I've got two options here, Nash continued. I could disappear. Start over somewhere else. His eyes flickered to Caleb. Or you could help me. Caleb's stomach churned. Help you? Nash smirked. You want your mom safe? I want a guarantee I don't end up in a cell. He leaned in slightly. You get me out of this, and you all walk away. Caleb's pulse roared. He wasn't serious. Right? Dr. Carter shook her head. Don't listen to him. But Nash's eyes stayed locked on Caleb. Think about it, kid. You've already been let down by the cops, by the system. Do you really think they'll keep you safe? Caleb's breath came fast. Could he do it? Could he lie to Kovacs, to his mother, just long enough to get Nash to let them go? Before he could answer, a distant roar. Engines. Caleb's heart leapt. They found him. Nash's expression hardened. He turned sharply, grabbing his phone. Caleb acted before he could think. He lunged. His shoulder slammed into Nash's side, knocking him off balance. The phone clattered to the ground. Caleb kicked it away. Dr. Carter seized the moment, twisting against her restraints, trying to break free. The barn doors burst open. A voice shouted, Don't move, Carter. Officer Kovacs stood in the doorway, gun drawn. Behind her, Maya Dawson. Nash froze. For the first time, he looked uncertain. Then he turned to run. Kovacs didn't hesitate. She tackled him before he made it 2 steps. Caleb staggered back, breathing hard. It was over. He felt hands on his shoulders. His mother. Her voice was shaking. You okay? Caleb nodded. Then he collapsed into her arms. For the first time in years, he felt safe. The sun filtered through the kitchen window. The scent of pancakes filled the air. Caleb sat at the table, Lily humming beside him as she colored. Their mother stood at the stove, smiling for the first time in a long time. The house was small, simple. A temporary home until they figured out what came next. But it was safe. Dr. Carter sat across from him. Her wrist was still bandaged, but she looked lighter. I know I messed up, she said quietly. I know you might not forgive me. Caleb studied her. She had made mistakes. Big ones. But she had also fought for them. I don't know if I can forgive you yet, he admitted. But I know you tried. Dr. Carter nodded, grateful for even that. The news played softly in the background. Nash Carter arrested. Facing multiple charges. No chance of walking free. Caleb let out a slow breath. The nightmare was over. His family was safe. And for the first time in years, he wasn't just surviving. He was living. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, casting a golden glow over the small but warm home. The scent of fresh pancakes filled the air as Caleb sat at the table, watching his family, his real family, heal. Lily sat beside him, humming a tune as she colored. Their mother, Maya, stood at the stove, flipping pancakes, her movements no longer sluggish, no longer afraid. They were safe. And for the first time in years, Caleb wasn't just surviving. He was living. Dr. Carter sat across from him, stirring her coffee. Her wrist was still bandaged, but she looked lighter. I know I messed up, she admitted, voice quiet. I know I hurt you by keeping secrets. Caleb studied her. She had made mistakes. Big ones. But she had also fought for them. He exhaled, pushing his fork through a pancake. I don't know if I can forgive you yet. He looked up, meeting her eyes. But I know you tried. Dr. Carter nodded, grateful for even that. The news played softly in the background. Nash Carter arrested. facing multiple charges. No chance of walking free. The nightmare was over. Caleb let out a slow breath. No more looking over his shoulder. No more wondering if tonight would be the night they lost everything again. For the first time, he had a future. Maya set a plate of pancakes in front of him, ruffling his hair gently. Eat up, kid. We've got a big day ahead. Caleb raised an eyebrow. Yeah? Doing what? His mother smiled. Living. And for the first time in years, Caleb smiled back. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Comment your country below, and let me know where you're reading from. Would you trust Dr. Carter after everything? Let's talk in the comments. Thanks for reading. More thrilling stories coming soon.